Week 3 of this little series. So you know what we're trying to accomplish. You've got an idea of the path, what that path to success looks like. You know the humans that you're targeting want your product or service. There's demand for your thing. That's all great. But now what? What happens if we don't pay attention to the money from the beginning? If you decide to skip the previous 2 weeks of research and planning, that's, don't skip it, but don't skip it. But if you wanted to, sure, go for it. I don't recommend that, but whatever. Today is the most important though. It is the reason that many of the businesses that have been coming to me and to our organization and to my business. It's the reason that a lot of these businesses have found themselves in desperate situations. As promised, today we're going to discuss finances. I'm your host, Bradley Martin, and this is Clearing the Way, a resource for small business owners. Hello, humans. I am your host, Bradley Martin, and this is Clearing the Way, a resource for small business. I talk with sales and HR experts, other small business owners, sometimes myself, and anyone else that can provide you or me with information to clear our way to success. Little disclaimer here. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not an accountant. I'm none of those things. Everything that I cover today will just be based on my experience with other small business owners and with my business. Okay, that's all the fun stuff. Okay, so the last 2 weeks we've covered a few topics that are obviously important. We've gone through them. You know they're important. You're on board. They're good to spend some time on when you're starting out. If people don't want your product, it's going to be difficult to sell it. If you don't know what you're trying to get out of this thing, it's going to be kind of difficult to get where you want to go. Cool. But what about the financial side? This one seems like it would be a no-brainer. Pay attention to the money. It's a business. That's a no-brainer. Of course we need to do that. But as I mentioned in the intro, time and time again, business owners come to us, come to me, come to our organization, come to people that I work with. They come to all of us with in need of assistance because they're in desperate situations that they're in because the financial side of things was neglected or just it was just neglected for too long. It sucks. I get it. It's overwhelming. It can feel overwhelming. It can feel like you don't know what you're doing because you're not any of the things that I talked about at the beginning. You're not a financial planner. You're not a financial advisor. You're not an accountant. You're not any of those things. I get it. It can be uncomfortable. It can be overwhelming. It can feel easier and more comfortable to just kind of stick your head in the sand and just kind of ignore all those things that you know you should be paying attention to. And that's an approach. Certainly an approach, but generally that doesn't end well. You can only do that for so long before the problems are unavoidable, and at that point they are normally not good. They're severe at that point. Okay. But, so we've covered that. But the other side of it is that if you're looking to expand at any point, if you need financing, if you need any of those things, you're also going to need to know your numbers. You're going to need to have good records to be able to get financing, or if you're going to try to sell your business, you're going to need to know all these things. When it's time to hire your first employee, you're going to need to know your numbers. If you're trying to decide whether or not to buy that that cool new espresso machine for the coffee shop, or you want to buy a new camera, or any of those things, you're going to need to know the numbers. It's that simple. You can't make any of those decisions, at least not, you can't make those decisions responsibly. I guess I'll use that. If you don't know your numbers. Okay, so we get it. It's important. Now, we're on the same page. Wonderful. You're bought in. You know it's important. You're going to keep listening. Wonderful. So, what are we actually talking about here? Let's start there, and then we'll work into what to do. Okay. So when we are talking about financial management or poor finances or not paying attention, what are the things we're not paying attention to? It is what we're referring to is a lack of awareness or a lack of control, or you aren't monitoring, or you're just not able to use your numbers to make strategic business decisions with your finances. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. But what does that actually look like? It might look like you overspending. It might look like budgeting issues where you constantly find yourself in situations where like you just don't know how, you don't have any money. You're not tracking things adequately. You don't know what your revenue is. You don't know what your expenses are. You don't know where all the money's going. You don't know where the money's coming from. It could look like any of those things or all of those things. And that is, if we haven't started yet, we can avoid all that. If you are started and you're seeing some of those things, then the things we're going to cover today they're simple. They're simple. If you're, depending on how deep down that rabbit hole you are, it might be a little bit more difficult to get out of, but there are solutions, and tracking those things is going to help. So, obviously, as I walk through that list of things that could look like it's obviously that those could lead to being in a pretty uncomfortable spot, and we want to avoid that. So, how do we do that? Okay. Now the fun part. We talked about step one of this. We talked about this in several episodes, actually. It's come up, I don't know how many times, but it's come up a lot. And that is just opening a bank account. Open a separate account for your business and keep everything separate. Keep your business expenses separate. Keep your business purchases separate. Keep your business income separate. Keep all of it separate. This is like, if you do nothing else, definitely do this. You got to do this. The next part of that, I talked about it in episode 35, and that's what I do. I talked about my version of bank accounts, and I covered my whole system in that episode. It's based on the book Profit First. I will link that down below and the episode. That has been super, super helpful. Listen to that episode and you will probably get my excitement coming through. It created a ton of clarity around my business and personal finances. Definitely give that a listen. And then if you're interested, get that book, take a look. And that's going to help you a lot. You don't have to use that. Obviously, there's plenty of other ways to begin tracking and begin just being aware of your finances. But that's a good starting point. Definitely open a business banking account, though. That's like, you got to do that. Okay, next up. Let's take a look at those goals that we discussed last week, and let's take those, and now let's create a financial plan. Wonderful. This sounds fun, right? Okay, so what are our financial goals? Did we cover any of those in our goals from last week? If not, then we need to come up with some financial goals. What are we trying to accomplish here? What are the numbers we're trying to hit? What are our projected expenses? What's our projected revenue? Obviously, that is based on if we haven't started yet. If you have started, then you can kind of look at some of the current numbers and make some estimations going forward, and you can see where you're currently at. So we're just looking at how much is going to come in, how much money is coming in, how much money is going out. If you haven't started, we're just working on expectations. What are we expecting to come in and out? And that is going to be based off of all of the research that we've done in the last couple weeks. That's important. It's pretty simple. It's important. We just need to know what's coming in, what's going out. What's coming in and what's going out. Okay. Cool. If you have a brick and mortar location, run through a couple examples here. Obviously, your expenses are going to be way higher and your overhead is going to be way higher than somebody who, like me, when I started, I had basically no overhead. I needed a laptop, I needed internet, and that's about it. But knowing what to expect your expenses to be obviously is going to be helpful. If you know that your expenses are going to be $10,000 a month, you've got to make more than that every month. And that means that we need to figure out how we're going to do that. If your expenses are lower, obviously anything above those expenses, like that all goes to growing the business. So, but we need to know what those expenses are, or at least expect what we're expecting those expenses to be. Need to have an idea of what those are going to be so that we can make informed decisions early on and later. We can identify some potential risks coming up if we know what those expenses are going to be. Cool. So let's create that plan. Let's figure out what we're expecting on both sides, what we're trying to accomplish. Wonderful. Off to a good start here. Next, we need to figure out how we're actually going to track all of these things once we are operating. We need to obviously keep accurate records for several reasons. One is understanding where everything is coming and going from. We'll cover that next, but that's going to be important. So we need an accurate way to track these things. We need to know what we're spending money on. Maybe if we don't have a good way of tracking things, maybe you ended up spending 50% of your budget buying new equipment last year, or 50% of your, 50% of your budget, 50% of your budget on equipment last year, and you didn't need any of that, and that left you short for a bunch of other things. But if you're not tracking and you don't have a good system for that, you don't know what you're spending money on. Maybe you're paying for a bunch of services that you don't need because you're not tracking it and you don't have a good way to track it. So we need to understand that. We need to understand where all the money's coming from, and we need to be able to, obviously, have an easy system for doing so. Also, going to be pretty helpful for taxes. That's an important one. In episode 30 with Shelley, we talked about bookkeeping and some of those topics. We dove a little bit deeper into that. You don't have to have a bookkeeper. We talked about that. We talked about the ways around hiring a bookkeeper, especially early on when you might not have the funding. It's not necessary to do. There's plenty of systems out there. If you can't hire a bookkeeper, get QuickBooks. If you're using Square, there's a ton of tracking within that. Probably not going to give you everything that you need, but there are a ton of cheap or free systems. QuickBooks is a good place to start. It's kind of the standard, so that's going to help you a lot. Link all of the things, and it'll make tracking your expenses and tracking your income, it'll make that a lot easier. So that is going to help a ton. Again, if you're ever going to need outside financing or anything like that, you're going to need to have a log of all of your financial records. One of the things that I wasn't around for it, but one of the things that I continue to hear about is when those PPP loans were going out, a lot of the businesses around here didn't have good records, so they couldn't apply. They couldn't get the funding that they needed because they didn't have good records. Set all these things up now. It's a lot easier to do it now than trying to scramble when you desperately need it. And if you're paying attention to it, we can hopefully avoid desperately needing it. Okay, great. Next up, cash flow. I mentioned it earlier, a little bit ago. So let's dive a little deeper. What are we talking about? Cash flow management is how your money is flowing in and out of your business, and when that's happening, and why that's happening. So this is going to, again, be super, super, super important. If we don't know these things, you might run into some problems. I mean, pretty simply, you might run into some issues. If you don't know when all your bills are coming out and when you get paid, when all of your clients are paying you and when things are due, you're going to run into some issues. I mean, I guess you might not. You might get lucky, but like early on, you might run into some challenges if you're not paying attention. We need to be paying attention to this kind of regularly. You should know when payments are coming out. It's going to help you to understand, which months or weeks is cash a little tighter, or when do you have a little extra? When can you make some of those moves that require some of the extra funding? Which months are your down months? Which months are your high months? This is going to be very, very important if we're trying to make better decisions for our business. If we know what's going on, we can make better marketing decisions or hiring decisions or equipment purchases. Like all of the decisions related to any of these things, we've got to know where the money's at and when everything is how it's all working through, flowing, as the name says, how it's flowing. Where's it coming from? Where's it going? When's it coming? When's it going? All of those things are super important. It's important, obviously. I don't know how many times I got to say it. Do you have to pay attention to it? No. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you can figure it out. Plenty of people have figured it out and not paid attention. You don't have to do any of the things that we've been talking about, but they're definitely going to help. They're definitely going to help you get to where you want to go quicker. They are definitely going to help you reduce some of your stress, or just maybe not reduce it, but not add to your stress levels. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, do the things that we're talking about so you don't find yourself in a situation that is desperate. That's not cool. It's not fun. You don't want to have to deal with it. It's just, yeah, do what you can while you can to set yourself up for the future. Okay. That's kind of it for today. We've covered all of the things I wanted to cover. If you have questions about any of the things we covered today, either reach out to me and I can help you to find somebody better suited if I can't help you, or just reach out to an actual, like an accountant, some professional, someone in that industry, an accountant, a bookkeeper, a financial advisor, something like that. Reach out to them. Do it early. If you already know you're behind, if you already know that you're in a bad spot, don't feel like it's easy to get in that spot. I went through it earlier. It's not like I'm just making that shit up. Like early on, I found myself not in I wasn't paying attention to things. I covered that in episode, whatever I said it was, 35 or something like that, 30. I don't know, whatever I said earlier. I wasn't paying attention to those things, and I didn't find myself in any bad situations. But again, that's because I had basically no overhead. If I had overhead, I probably would not have been in a good spot. because I had no idea what was going on for the first year and a half. No idea where money was coming from or going. I just had so many subscriptions to things, like no idea what was going on. So I understand how it's easier and why it's easier to just, stick your head down and deal with things as they come up. It's a lot less stressful in the now. Not good for future you. So, don't neglect your finances. That's what we're getting at. The gist of today's episode is don't neglect them. Ask for help. Ask for help early. If you don't know, like we talk about every week, don't be too proud to ask for help, because then you get into situations where you actually might need help and you're in a spot that is almost unhelpable. Don't get there. It's not necessary. Don't neglect your finances. We've gone through some of the basics. Reach out if you need more help. Reach out to a professional if you need more help. And hopefully this helped. I probably said important and help 138 times today. But you get the point. Don't neglect your finances. If you enjoyed this episode, or any of the episodes up to this point, share them with a friend. It's always super helpful. Leave a review. That's also helpful. Don't let your friends or yourself experience any of the problems that we've talked about in the last couple weeks. Share this with them. Leave a review. That's all helpful. And if you need any assistance, like I already mentioned, reach out to me at my email. Ooh, excuse me. Bradley, Bradley, at clearingthewaypodcast.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for doing whatever it is that you're doing to consume this, whether it's in the clips or in the full episode. I appreciate that. Have a marvelous week, the best one of your life, maybe. And I will see you kind of virtually next week. See ya. Thanks for listening, watching, wherever you're consuming this. I'm your host, Bradley Martin, and this is Clearing the Way, a resource for small business owners.